I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're going to dye some cotton yarn. And specifically, I want to play around with one of my favorite types of techniques to do on wool yarn, and that is creating a layered tonal colorway. Now on wool, I achieve this by taking the yarn, dyeing it all over in one color, where we get a tonal effect with the color more saturated in some areas than others. And then I put it into a second color, normally happening on the same day. However, cotton and cotton-based yarns absorb color slower than wool, and with a different mechanism. And so I'm gonna have to think a little bit about how to modify this technique to work on some cotton yarn. Our cotton yarn today is Knit Picks Cotton Boucle. It is a worsted weight, 100% Tanwis cotton yarn. It has one lofty ply that's really thick and then one thinner ply, giving it this sort of wavy texture to the yarn, but it dyes up so beautifully and I like dyeing it a lot, and so I have dyed this maybe at this point more than almost any other cotton base. Pretty close. As I start prepping the fiber to pre-soak it, let's think about the plan a little bit. Because if I want to layer color on, get a tonal effect, and then layer on a second color, I am going to need to wait a significant amount of time in between those steps. And this is because if I layer one color on and then layer on another color in 30 minutes, the colors are going to mix while they are still dissolved, before they've bound onto the yarn. And part of the goal of this technique is not to say blend a yellow and blue to make a green, but to layer the blue and the yellow to get multiple different types of greens throughout the yarn, to get different ratios of the two colors mixed together. And I'm going to want to try to do this with as little water as possible, I think. So really, I'm going to be making things up as we go along a lot. Now, this yarn is not that absorbent. I am going to want it to be pre-soaked, really well pre-soaked in just plain tap water. We'll add soda ash to it probably tomorrow. But I want to try to get as much of the air out of the yarn as possible because I'm going to want to get decent coverage of the colors. Now, what I haven't decided yet is how thoroughly I'm going to work the colors through with the two different layers, but we're going to kind of wait and see what is happening. Now, with plant-based fibers like this, we will be using fiber reactive dyes and soda ash because that is the type of dye that you need to dye plant-based fibers like cotton. Okay, I will need to come back and squeeze more air out of this, but now we're going to wait at least 24 hours for this to get nice and saturated before we start applying dye in the two layers. And I don't know if I've clarified well enough while pre-soaking this that the reason why we're going to have to wait a long period of time is that fiber reactive dyes will react in the presence of soda ash, so a higher pH, a more alkaline pH, the dyes and the cotton fibers in a very slow process. This is why this can work so well with ice dyeing and other techniques where the dyes slowly come into contact with the fabric or fibers that you're dyeing. And so by giving things time before we add the second color, we're going to give the first color a chance to have bound to a significant portion of our yarn. Now, I have used heat in the past with cotton yarns, and in a more recent experiment, I found that adding heat may not be the best thing for certain pigments, that really giving a long wait at room temperature tends to give better results. And so that is the other reason why we will be waiting 24 hours approximately in between adding the two colors. But I suppose this brings me to another question of at some point, and of course different pigments will vary, but at some point it could be fun to take a bunch of mini skeins, dye them all like the same color, and then in 10-minute intervals remove them from the dye and wash them, just to see what is that time point where we stop seeing the color increase. If that's an experiment you want me to do, please let me know down in the comments below. But anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. I put on got my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves to mix up our soda ash bath. So that way we can get our yarn ready to dye. Now, directions I followed in the past recommend using 1 cup of soda ash and 1 gallon of hot tap water, but I want to be a little more conservative over my soda ash, so I measured out 1/4 cup of the soda ash and dissolved it in 4 cups, or approximately 1 liter of hot tap water, stirring it to dissolve. And I will use this soda ash bath for multiple projects I am working on today. Okay, we have been pre-soaking our cotton boucle yarn for 2 days. And the one big thing I want to show as I squeeze out most of this pre-soak liquid, I want to remove as much of the pre-soak as I can. So look at how yellow the water is, and it will shift our lovely soda ash bath. It will shift yellow just because of whatever is coming out. So I don't dilute the soda ash. I could pop this into my spin dryer for a couple of minutes to remove excess water. So that way the yarn is really just damp, but I don't think it's gonna be like a huge problem. Now that we're in this soda ash bath that is still a little bit warm, you can see that the 4 cups of water just barely covers the 200 grams of yarn. But we will, again, as I said, be able to use this multiple times. And I think I want to go ahead and let this sit. Well, let's go ahead and let it sit for 10 minutes. I don't know how long of a soak in here is necessary, but let's measure it today. And I rinsed out the original container because when we're done with the yarn in here, I'll squeeze out the liquid and pop it back in here. Okay, I'm now going to remove the yarns one at a time. You can see our soda ash is looking way more yellow. Removing as much of the liquid as I can, because the less liquid that's in here now, the more chance we have the dye to get all over our yarn. But we will go look at the dyes in a moment. For as unabsorbent as this was at first, it is now quite absorbent. But I'm going to set this aside and let's go take a look at our colors. Now, the 2 colors I plan to use today are a pink, or at least a pinkish red, and a turquoise blue. Here from the Dharma Fiber Reactive Presoaking line, I have fuchsia red and turquoise. And as I mentioned, these are the 2 colors I plan to use. Hopefully we'll end up with something purplish. Depending on the ratios, it could lean more berry pink, or it could possibly lean more like royal blue in the end. I have not done a lot of color mixing with these dyes, which brings me to the fact that I probably should do a color mixing video with all these fiber reactive dyes so that we have an understanding of proportion. But I think because colors with turquoise can take a little bit longer to work through the colors and spread more, I think my plan is to do the fuchsia red on the first side and then the turquoise on the second side. It's less of a side, but it's more of like the second layer. Since we're going for some kind of layered tonal, I think my plan will be to add the dye onto the yarn, work it through a little bit, not just leave it immediately where it was poured, but work it through before waiting and then doing the second layer. So most of the color will be on kind of on one side of the yarn, but I still want to kind of distribute it through. The thing that we are going to have to be careful with is that we don't want to have too much water present, because then that'll dilute the color overall. I put my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves back on and weighed out 1 gram of our fuchsia red dye. Now, another thing I don't really have a good feel for is the amount of dye I need per amount of yarn to get a saturated color. So I'm going for, I think in this project, a total of 2 grams of dye for 200 grams of yarn. That is a ratio I would use on wool with acid dyes. So we'll see how this goes. I may end up wishing that I had used more dye. But anyway, I went to dissolve this dye in hot tap water, trying to keep the volume not super big. I guess I should probably measure out the volume here. I just double checked, and one of these cups, like the one I'm using here, fits a little bit over a cup of water, maybe around like 275 milliliters approximately. And so by filling the cup not all the way to the brim, I can say we have approximately 1 cup, or maybe around 240, 250 milliliters of water in here. I could have measured it, but I didn't, because why waste more pigment and using multiple containers when I can just use this one that I have right here. But now let's go apply that dye. The name of the game now is don't make a mess, don't make a mess, don't make a mess, don't make a mess. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take our yarn and sort of arrange it in the pan, even though I do plan on moving it and shifting it around, especially after we've added the dye. I think I will squish it to try to work that through. And actually, let's put the zip ties on the other side. And now I am breathing. Let's go. We are applying the dye, trying to get some amount of coverage. The good news is that it seems to have dissolved very, very well. And now I'm working it through. Because normally, if this were wool, I would be doing this in a way where I would have it sort of like immersed in the bath, and maybe I wouldn't move it if I wanted it to be more tonal. But it's okay if we have little patches of white or pastel left behind. It's okay if we have different layers and amounts of the saturation. I just want the two skeins to be similar to one another to the best of my ability. But you know what? It is what it is. The good thing is adding 1 cup of water on here, things are not dripping. Things are wet, but definitely not dripping. And so I think that this may work kind of like what I want. Oh my gosh, I'm really excited. It's about 9 a.m. on a Thursday. So tomorrow morning, we'll come back and add on our next color and see what we end up with. I am so excited. The next morning, I put my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves back on and measured out 1 gram of the turquoise fiber reactive dye, dissolving it in hot tap water to a final volume of approximately a cup, again based on the plastic cups that I use for this process. I probably could have mixed this dye up the night before, because in the absence of soda ash, I don't think the molecules would degrade, but I don't know. And so mixing it fresh seems like the best idea. All right, it's been 24, 25 hours since I applied the pink dye. It's a little after 10 a.m. on Friday, and we do see some tonal variation in here. As I lift up, we are not dripping. We have some very visible light patches on both of our skeins, which is fine because that was part of our desired effect. One thing I am curious about, what? Okay, there we get some pink. I like tapped it and I was like, why am I not seeing dye come off? Now, turquoise is a color that is a little bit notorious. You'll notice that the container has a label marked with a T. Now, for turquoise itself, it's obvious that it has turquoise in it, but they do label colors with turquoise. I don't know, remember if it's because it's prone to breaking or needs a lot of washing or what, but you know what it's time for? It's time to add the dye onto our yarn. I'm trying to apply it to some areas that were a little bit lighter. You can see on its own, it's a beautiful bright turquoise blue. Immediately on our yarn, it is looking more like a royal blue. but now we're gonna work it through some. But it's looking like that royal blue because of the pink in here, warming it up. I know from color mixing yarn with acid dyes that if I add pink to a turquoise color that we will get a royal blue or a purple depending on the proportions. So that like Crayola marker blue color is a color you can mix. Now already, and we probably do have some drips of water in here, already we see a yarn that is delightfully tonal. I am seeing not just some areas of bright blue on both of them, but areas of purple, of like royal blue, maybe a couple areas of pink, which I think I am going to still try to work through. I don't really want too much unpinked area. We could add more water, but I'm hesitant to do that. I feel like 2 cups of water or a cup of water per skein, we're holding really well. I can lift the yarn and it is not dripping. So I think that's good. And already these colors are stunning. Oh my gosh, they remind me, so I work that through a little bit of some like broken violet vibes, but more saturated. Okay, let me go get cleaned up because now it's gonna be time for me to sit back and wait. Now, clearly a follow-up to this particular project will be for me to take this yarn and maybe the same yarn, maybe a different yarn, and take the same 2 colors, the same amount, pour on the pink, pour on the blue, and then scrunch everything together to see if we get something that feels similar to this. The result that I'm seeing in here is reminiscent of what I call like a layered tonal when I'm doing this on wool yarn. And so what I don't know is if I layered the colors together so quickly, and I suppose I should have squeezed it to see how much pink came out, but I think that if I did them in close proximity, we would see some variation of color in there, but very quickly more of the dye would blend and mix together in the liquid form versus layering on top of the yarn. So, I mean, I guess some kind of side-by-side is something that could be done in the future, but maybe first I'd have to try it with just doing it all at once to see if it could be done in one day, sort of in one step. But anyway, now I'm going to set this aside for at least 24 hours, but more likely a couple of days, because then I can wash it all together with a bunch of other cotton yarn projects I have been working on. It is Monday morning. Oh, it looks so pretty. I'm going to start adding water, but also some dish soap, because I need to rinse out our dye. We are going to have a lot of color come out. Now, one reason to add soap for the initial rinsing begin is to prevent backstaining. But this is a case where I applied the dye all over, and so backstaining is not something that I am that worried about. Although I am worried about staining my sink. Now, what I've been seeing happen with similar colors, or at least other pinks and purples, is that initially I will be rinsing out a lot of blue, and then over time that shifts more purple. But I don't remember how much pink it felt like there was left when we added the blue. I'm just really excited to play around with this more, and I have gone ahead and ordered more cotton yarn. So that way we can play around with this. Maybe with these same colors. Maybe we'll go for a green. But, oh my gosh, this is looking a lot lighter. And pretty quickly, which is nice. So I'm going to go ahead and keep washing this off camera. I'm going to add a little bit of some Simple, I think, at this point. I tend to like coat a finger and then put it in. I'm mostly wearing gloves right now because I did not want to stain my hands blue. Because even though you hit a point where the fiber reactive dyes are not going to react with your fiber anymore and just need to be rinsed out, but they could still stain your skin. And so that's just worth keeping in mind. And I'm going to make the water a little bit warmer. This is a yarn base where they recommend machine washing cold, or hand washing actually. They recommend that you hand wash it. And I think it's because like the boucle, like this 2-ply, is not as sturdy as something that is spun with a tighter twist. And so maybe it's more prone to pilling. I don't know the rationale there. But I know that, oh my goodness, this seems to be clearing really quickly. And I mean, there's still color coming out, but that's so much lighter. Okay, I'll keep working on this off camera, but I am thrilled, beyond thrilled. All right, I let the yarn sit in here for a little while, and it's gonna be dark. Now, you'll notice that the color doesn't seem to be getting lighter. This color is phenomenal. And for the first time, like, I'm really pleased because we actually weighed out the powder. And we knew, I dyed 200 grams of yarn and I used 2 grams of dye. This is a similar ratio that I might do with acid dyes. But I think that this is a situation where we had a very low volume of water. And so that allowed a lot of the pigment to really be in contact with the fibers. But again, I don't know. I don't know the best way to go about it. But I'm going to keep rinsing out the soap and then check back in with you. Okay, I bet if I left it in here to soak, we would see more color come out. But I think this is as clear as I'm going to be able to get it. So and like fiber reactive dyes on cotton should be hot water stable. Anything rinsing out is just, you know, I recommend washing on its own the first few times you wash it, just because color could come out. There's like a hint of some pink in there. But I'm going to pop this through the spin dryer, and I want to show it here. And this is after the spin dryer when the yarn is still damp. It is a lot lighter, and there wasn't color coming out, maybe like something super pastel, of the bath. It's just a wet fabric, or wet yarn is going to look a lot darker than it dries. And cotton is one of the ones where it's very dramatic. But I'll see you once I'm going to hang it up to dry, and I'll see you when it's completely dry. I am absolutely obsessed with how this yarn turned out. I do want to take a quick moment to give a huge shout out and thank you to all of the ChemKnits patrons, including Don Jans, Tamara Spanes, Jessica Parco, Bernadette Crum, and the rest of the names you see right here. And even if your name isn't on here, you can follow me on Patreon for free, but most of the posts that I create over there go to all of the fiber patrons. Patreon's a platform that allows you to support me and the work that I do on this channel directly on a monthly basis, and in exchange you get some cool perks and some bonus content, early access to new things, and you can find more details over at patreon.com/ChemKnits. I worked on a few different cotton dyeing videos around the same time as this one, and they did not all turn out like this. Which is really me saying they didn't all turn out as I expected and hoped in my head. Layering the colors like this. We have bright blue, we have some berry pink. There's some more like blurple tones in here. There are many different hues, and I'm not sure if things would have turned out quite like this if we had layered the colors on top of one another right away, or if waiting that time made a difference. I honestly don't know the answer there. Now, obviously, that is an experiment that we could do. However, the way I pour the dyes onto the yarn and how much I work it through probably makes a difference as well. So I don't know if we would see a dramatic difference if I tried to set up this experiment, especially when the difference involves waiting like a full 24 hours before applying the second color. But if that's something you want to see me do, I'd be happy to try it at some point. I feel like this is one of the first times that I got a colorway on cotton yarn that is very similar to my favorite types of colorways to dye on wool. A little bit random, variegated, layered, not quite perfect repeating. And so this is something I want to do over and over and over again. I mean, imagine doing it with the bright blue with like a navy on top or a deep purple and having like not just the mixture of colors, but like a light difference in saturation. Oh, I have so many ideas and combinations I want to do. Now, the other thing that is unique about this particular project is I know exactly how much dye I used. I know I used 1 gram of dye of each color. So we have a depth of shade of 1%. So equivalent of 1 gram of dye per 100 grams of yarn. This is a very similar depth of shade and percentage that I might use on wool. Now, a project that I should do, and this is something I could do all in one day, would be to set something up very similarly. Put color on one side, put color on the other, but have one shoebox that is cotton with fiber reactive dyes, the other acid with fiber reactive dyes, and try to treat them as similarly as I possibly can using the exact same amount of dye to see how the results vary. That is not something I've ever done before, and I am so curious to see how it would turn out. Because the one thing I don't have a great feeling for is how much dye you need to use when you're dyeing cotton yarn. Like, a lot of times my instinct is always add more and more and more the more I use, even if that means I'm going to need to wash the yarn more. The more dye I add, the more saturated the results will be. And I feel like things could be a little darker even, but I feel like I'm finally like on the right track. And so that has me very, very excited. I guess my other win is that I used minimal water volume, which was probably helpful. So this is a video I will refer back to more in the future. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. I mostly dye wool-based yarns with acid dyes, but I really am in 2026 trying to push myself to play with plant-based fibers more in different ways to really push myself there, and also to start using my fiber reactive dyes as acid dyes more frequently. Which, the only reason why I don't do it is because I don't have as many fiber reactive dyes. And that should not be a reason for me to not do something. I try to read as many comments as I possibly can, and I take screenshots of suggestions and requests and have a whole folder that I go through. So if there's anything you would really like to see, please let me know. It may, I can't always promise that it'll happen within a short period of time, but when the more times a similar thing gets suggested, the more it like becomes a little brain worm. It may not happen that soon, but it does help reinforce my desire to play around with all these other ideas I tend to mention in the conclusions. Thank you so much for watching.